to another edition of Hardfire TV. My name is Anthony Santoro, and I'll be your host today. My guest is Dr. Cameron Weber. Dr. Cameron is an economics professor at St. John's University, I believe. In some past lives, he was chief of financial oversight for the U.S. State Department, correct?
Yeah.
And even before that, he was a diplomat for the state in Central Asia and West Africa. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so today's topic is trade barriers.
Yes, it is.
Now, to begin, what are trade barriers?
Trade barriers, so trade is between individuals, you and I. Let's say I've got a pair of glasses and you got a pencil.
What's trade dues?
Yeah, we could trade them, and we both gain through trade, right? So trade is through individuals trading, and they both gain through trade. And then what happens is the state, the nation state, the imagined community of the nation state, prevents the free trade by putting in barriers. And the reason they do that is because it gives above normal profits to certain special interest groups. Mm-hmm. So trade barriers help certain people and harm everyone. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
Trade barriers.
Topic in the news, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how exactly do trade barriers relate to economic well-being?
Very good. So what I want to show you now is this is called Production Possibility Frontier. Guns and butter. So, guns and butter. So the way this works is, this was obviously developed during the Cold War, and it's a metaphor. A society can produce, let's say, 10 large guns or 10 pounds of butter, right? So you either have a military-industrial complex or 10 pounds of butter. And as long as you have a free market, in other words, as long as there's no government intervention, you can produce here at your production possibility frontier, somewhere along here, as long as all factors of production are able to seek their highest return, you're here on your production possibility frontier. Then what happens, and this is from Ann Kreuger, 1974 paper, The Political Economy of the Rent-Seeking Society. And what she says that is when you put in trade barriers, what happens is you're no longer at your production possibility frontier. Society cannot produce and consume as much as they could absent trade barriers. And so the trade barriers are not just consumption goods, but also inputs to production. So when you put in trade barriers, society cannot produce. It creates less wealth and less economic well-being because you're not at your production possibility frontier because of the trade barriers. So that's an example. So, yeah.
We've all heard the term guns and butter.
Yeah, gun versus butter. That's originally what it does.
Thanks for illustrating it for us.
Yeah, it's a metaphor, and it shows what happens. You can't produce at your maximum, consume at your maximum. Everybody's well-being is reduced because of the trade barriers.
Okay. And the trade barriers are imposed by the government.
Right. Yeah, we'll get to why that is. Yes.
So there's two types as I understand it. One is tariffs and one is non-tariffs.
Right.
Give us an example of tariff.
Okay, a tariff is, you're right, there's tariff and non-tariff trade barriers. A tariff is simply a tax, like a sales tax. So what Donald Trump is doing now is putting on 25% tax or tariff on aluminum and 15 on steel or vice versa or something like that. So it's just a tax. So I'll show that one first and how that works. And then the other type is a non-tariff trade barrier. And that's like, for example, quotas. We're only allowed to import 1 million avocados from Mexico.
Gotcha.
Or 10,000 t-shirts from Guatemala. Or
Solar panels.
Solar panels.
Which are imported from China.
Yeah. Let's say you have a content requirement that 60% of the imported solar panel has to be made with U.S. parts or something, and labor. So you have these those are non-tariff trade barriers, and we'll cover those too. Regulation is also a form of non-tariff trade barriers. So why don't I show you this,
Yeah, the tariff first.
the
Yeah,
tariff.
Yeah.
how this works. So, okay, so let's talk about steel in the USA. This is steel in the USA, and the way economics works is when the price goes down, you're willing to demand more, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, yeah? And when the price goes up, you're willing to supply more, right?
Right.
And so this is demand and supply, and this is absent government intervention, or it's called perfect competition.
Yeah.
And what results under perfect competition is this optimized price and optimized quantity. So absent government intervention, you get an optimal quantity and optimal price. That's the market. Suppliers and demanders for steel in the US are interacting, maximizing economic efficiency, putting you here along the production possibility frontier. And then importantly, also interestingly, you'll see that all of these people would have been willing and able to pay more for steel than the optimal price, right? So
Yes.
all of this is what's known as consumer surplus. So what free trade then is allow a maximized consumer surplus, and then all of these people would have been willing and able to supply at a lower price than the market clearing price.
So that's absence of tariff, right?
Absent anything, yes, only with the market allowing people freedom of choice, freedom of contract, freedom of trade. So you get maximized producer surplus.
Right.
So by definition, the market maximizes your economic welfare, and which is evidenced by maximized consumer surplus and maximized producer surplus. So what happens then when you put in a tariff, let's say that you're a company that's making metal canisters for gasoline, or metal canisters for spray paint, or metal canisters for whatever that uses, or furniture made out of steel. So you are able to source this stuff at the cheapest price worldwide with free trade. But when you put in a tax or a tariff, what happens is, this is called tax wedge, right? Tax wedge, or tariff wedge in this case. Tariff tax wedge. And so this would be your 25% on steel, or your 15% on aluminum, or whatever Donald Trump's doing these days. So this tax wedge then means that now you'll see where it shows the supply and demand. Now it's here. So you're getting a lower quantity of trade.
So the government is essentially trying to control something that is best left all alone.
Right. And see the reason
It works well when it's left all alone.
Yeah, and so you'll see here's the new, of course, and so here's the new price that the demander pays. Here's the new price that the supplier receives, right? Here's where the supply, demand. And so all of this is the tariff that is received by the government. Right?
Okay.
Right? So this tariff then means that there's less quantity, less economic activity, and all of this producer surplus is lost, all of this consumer surplus is lost, and this loss is called the deadweight loss due to government intervention.
How does this affect prices?
So, right, so the prices now, so this lost consumer surplus, producer surplus is a deadweight loss of government intervention, because you're getting these less economic activity. The demander, the buyer, pays a higher price here.
Yeah.
The supplier gets a lower price here, and the difference is the government revenues. Government revenues. So, right, that's how that works.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
What about the non-tariff?
Let me just give you an example.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's something from the New York Times, Wednesday, April 11. How long can we last? Trump's steel tariffs hit home, and it's about a business that makes cylinders for high-pressure gas, and the 25% tariff, and they were using Chinese steel, right? So they put on the tariff. So now they have to pay $178,000 more for their first shipment.
This is one company?
Yeah, one company's week's worth of input now has to pay $180,000 more, which is about the value of the tariff. So, right? So that's a...
So the only winner here is the government, essentially.
Well,
fills the coffers.
Yeah. In this case, the government wins, but also because Chinese steel is more expensive, domestic steel makers don't have to be as efficient. They're prevented from competition because they don't have to compete with Chinese steel anymore because it's 25% more than it was. So now and that's called what's seen and what is unseen.
Mm-hmm.
So Donald Trump's constituency are the steel makers and the steel unions.
Mm-hmm.
So by giving them special protection, they donate to his campaign and he puts on the tariffs. And it's seen that...
It's a quid pro quo thing, isn't it?
It is, yes. We need to raise $2 trillion to become president of the United States. So Trump got a lot of free advertising, but in general, that's how it works. You provide protectionism, and they feed your campaign.
I'm glad you interjected that. It wasn't quite in the script, but good. Can we do the non-tariff thing now, though? So we can illustrate for the audience thing with non-tariff. Do you need to erase this?
Yeah, so that's the tariff or tax example. So then you have a non-tariff trade barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say solar panels.
Which are made in China, I believe, right?
Solar panels are made all over the world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but
They're popular in China.
they are, yes, the Chinese government highly subsidized solar panels, which means that we could then import inexpensive solar panels from China and put them on our houses inexpensively and then fight global warming if we believe in that, and exercising our choice in the market to then fight global warming by buying the least expensive solar panels. So, same thing. Here's the price and the quantity. Here's the demand. Supply, willing to supply more as the price goes up, and willing to demand more as the price goes down. We get optimal price and quantity. Everybody who wants solar panels is able to get solar panels where and when they want them at the least price, the highest quality due to competition. And here's your consumer surplus. All of these people would have been willing and able to pay more for solar panels than the market clearing price. All of these people would have been willing and able to supply solar panels at a lower price than the market price. So producer surplus and consumer surplus is maximized, everybody wins, global warming is fought, right? So then we ask ourselves, why would the government intervene into the solar panel market? And this was put into place under the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats are always saying, oh, global warming, yet they put in trade barriers against Chinese solar panels under the Democrats. And it's continued under Donald Trump. So we ask ourselves, so what is then a non-tax trade barrier? And what that is something that makes it more difficult to do business. Let's say that if we are to import Chinese solar panels, that 60% of it has to be made with American parts. In other words, we ship American parts to China, they assemble it. And that's the way the market works anyway, right? For computers and everything. You design it here and do the high tech, and it's assembled in China or in Vietnam or Malaysia or whatever. Mm-hmm. So when you make it more difficult to do business, like say you're only allowed to support 1,000 solar panels from China, or you have to use 60% content, Or, you know, so what that means is, that means supply shifts back. When it's harder to do business, supply shifts back. Right?
Mhm.
So, because it's harder to do business, you no longer have free trade, there's some kind of non-tax trade barrier. And you'll see that here's where now the new quantity, so you get less quantity, and you see a higher price, right? So what the trade barriers do is create a higher price and a lower quantity. Here, and we're supposed to be fighting global warming, yet the Democrats continued under Trump, put on solar panel trade barriers against Chinese solar panels, so solar panels are more expensive in the United States. You get a higher price and less quantity, and also less competition means worse quality stuff.
Yeah.
Now this is what's interesting. So here's the dead weight loss again. This is all of the lost producer surplus due to government intervention. Here's all the lost consumer surplus due to government intervention. So you know, so you're down here again. You know, you're not producing at your maximum. Consuming, your standard of living is not as good as it would have been had there not been the trade barriers. So you'll see now so certain people benefit from the trade barriers. You'll see that this new price, all of this consumer surplus is now producer surplus.
Mhm.
Right? You
Mhm.
see this red used to be consumer surplus, but now because of the new shift back in supply, this is all now a transfer from consumers of electricity, consumer surplus, to producer surplus. So all of this surplus or profit, which used to go to the consumer, now goes to the producers.
I see.
Right?
Mhm.
And the producers are seen. Everyone, the solar panel manufacturers donate to the Democrat Party and obviously to Trump still, right?
Right.
So because what happens, they get protected from competition, so they get above normal profits. It's a transfer from consumers, which is everyone. We're all consumers, right? We all consume electricity, to producers. So everyone pays for above normal profits for the producers.
See?
So what trade barriers do, non-tax trade barriers, in both cases protect special interest groups from competition, gives them above normal profit, which they then share with political campaigns.
It's like an artificial system.
It's artificial.
Tampering with the system.
Right. And the best thing to do is just to have unilateral free trade. Right now, under the Brexit, they're negotiating for trade. The best thing to do instead of negotiate is just allow free trade.
Mhm.
And the free trade will get you back up here and everybody.
Could you talk about free trade in agriculture?
But first, so in the United States, there's about 2,000 people manufacturing solar panels. Those 2,000 people, the producers.
That's an actual number.
Yeah, around 2,000 people manufacturing solar panels in the United States, they all get above normal profits.
Mhm.
Everyone else has to pay more for electricity. However, there's about 200,000 people installing solar panels. So those 200,000 people lose their jobs because Chinese solar panels are more expensive. There are less solar panels being installed at higher prices, worse quality.
Right,
So that's the way it works.
Agriculture?
Yeah.
Free trade?
Wait, first I wanted to.
There's another thing on the show.
Yeah, I wanted to finish something here. Solar panels. So let's say that there's 300 million people in the United States. 300 million people in the United States, and let's say that there's 5 solar manufacturers, 5 solar panel manufacturers.
This would be domestic, right?
And one of these solar panel manufacturers is owned by a certain ex-vice president of the United States with a Nobel
No
Peace Prize.
kidding.
Yes. one of these 5 remaining solar panel manufacturers in the United States who are getting above normal profits, is owned by a certain ex-vice president with the Nobel Prize. So let's say that all these 300 million people now have to pay an extra $1 for electricity, because electricity is more expensive because the things creating electricity is more expensive.
Right.
So that's $300 million. So there's a transfer from everyone, $300 million, now goes to these 5 producers of solar panels, right? So that's 60 million profit, above normal profit. Each solar panel manufacturer makes $60 million in profit, paid for by everyone. And then you just give half of that profit, above normal profit, to those who gave you the trade war.
Let's talk about making America great again.
Yeah, that's how we're making America great.
That's how we're making America great.
These trade barriers have been put on ever since the Constitution was signed. The first U.S. Congress, which the Jeffersonians warned us about, within the first week of the first Congress meeting in the United States, there was 20 special interest groups seeking trade barriers.
Goes back that far.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Can we talk about agriculture now? It's on the program.
You got it. I think we've got just about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Then you want to skip the agriculture and get right to this one. I know you wanted to talk about economic nationalism.
Yeah, economic nationalism. So it's trade barrier. So that's a jingoism, nationalism, popular,
Right.
the demagoguery.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't allow the Chinese to get an advantage in solar panels.
That's the language that's being used.
We can't allow the Chinese to get an advantage in steel and aluminum, right? You know, this economic nationalism. We need it for our war machine. We need it for our tech. You know, we need it to create jobs. When in fact, it doesn't. It loses jobs.
Yeah.
And this is from The Economist magazine about how about the steel trade barriers. The United States has almost 30% excess capacity in steel. So there's no point for any trade barriers if we have excess capacity. And the biggest steel people we import by far is from Canada. so we have to protect our steel industry from those terrible Canadian army. Yeah.
Or else it's 1812 over here.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so, but on your agriculture point, yeah, that's the agriculture bill. The agriculture is also highly protected in trade. And the reason for that is both the Democrats and the Republicans like agriculture, special interest groups, because in the cities, the Democrats, under the agriculture bill, that pays for food stamps. And the Republicans like special above normal profits for agriculture businesses in the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the agriculture bill that they fight over, the Democrats and Republicans fight over, in the end, put on trade barriers against agriculture goods and subsidize agriculture businesses because it buys their constituencies. So you might want me to talk about agriculture.
So you spoke about agriculture.
Yeah, that's it.
Good.
Right.
Thanks, Mark.
Right. And these trade barriers also create a lot of bureaucracies. You need technocrats and government officials to monitor the content, to fill out the forms, to get the stuff out of customs.
That's cutting government, isn't it?
That's draining the swamp.
Swamping the drain, well,
Right. And so, like I said, it's gone back to the beginning of the founding of the country due to the Constitution, which originally did not give a monopoly of trading rights.
Constitution, you mean Constitution?
Yeah, the Constitution.
The Constitution.
Yeah, prior, under the Articles of Confederation, the different states competed for talent and free trade and capital, but under the Constitution, it gave trading rights to the federal government. And we've been stuck with that ever since.
Any last minute comment then before we close? Would you like to sort of wrap up?
Yeah, so the thing to do is, because these special interest groups are getting this and have gotten these special interests over time, and it hurts the welfare of everyone, what we need to do is reform trade and allow free trade. And the way to do that is to say, okay, over the next 4 years, we're going to reduce the trade barriers, so that gives people plenty of time to adjust. And that's what we should do.
And the market will take care of itself.
Yeah, then people can buy when and where they want at
Right.
the best price due to competition.
You sure you want to trade those glasses, too?
Right, yeah, but no, we can't.
I like
We'll
those.
break it in half, give half to the state, and then we can trade.
Thank you for watching Hardfire TV. We'll see you next time on Brooklyn Free Speech Network. My guest has been Cameron Weber, Dr. Cameron Weber. I'm Tony Santoro. Thanks again for viewing. Good night.